Hi guys! How are you all doing today? Welcome to this sketchy live drawing session, and we're going to be drawing a portrait in Procreate today. And I'm Lisa Filion, and I'm really excited to be here. So thank you so much for joining me. To start with, I'm just going to switch over to my iPad and we're going to look at our inspiration photo together, which is from the Sktchy app. First of all, what I want to do is open up a new canvas with you guys. Just for those of you that are maybe joining us who are brand new to Procreate, I wanted to kind of start from scratch with this portrait today. So we're going to press the plus button up in the top right corner. And I've created some preset canvases. I like to, when I'm just kind of sketching, use an 8 by 10 inch canvas at 300 DPI. When I'm doing a commission or something that I plan on printing a little bit larger, my go-to is 11 by 14 or 16 by 20 for portraits. If you're creating this from scratch, you can just click on the plus button at the top, and this is where you're going to put in your dimensions. So if you're more comfortable working in millimeters, centimeters, inches, or pixels, you have those options there. I'm just going to change this over to inches. I'm going to type in 8 by 10. And my DPI is already set to 300 because that's my preferred dots per inch. So that's the resolution. So 300 is a nice resolution for printing, but it's not so high that you lose a lot of layers. So this gives me 70 layers in the particular iPad screen that I'm working on. It'll depend also on the size of your iPad. So just so you guys know just a little bit about starting a new canvas, we're going to create that canvas. And we're going to do a split screen of our muse. So I'm going to swipe up from the bottom, and I've already saved my photo from the Sktchy app. And I'm going to drag my Photos app to, for me, I like it on the left-hand side because I'm right-handed. And I can just kind of swipe and click on it in order to get a nice black background. So it's just as easy as that. You can have it as a total split screen, 50-50, or what I usually like to do is to make my reference photo a bit smaller. And I love this reference photo. I think Sktchy should be posting probably a link, hopefully, in the comments here. But I love this photo because I was drawn to the color of the background too. I'm really into greens these days. I don't know, it's a little bit of an obsession of mine. Do you guys go through color obsessions where you're really drawn to a particular color? So right now for me, it's green. And so yeah, this was an exciting portrait to work with. It's got great lighting too. And it's also a profile pic, which is a little bit different. So it's kind of nice to do something a bit different every once in a while. So just looking at the comments now, hi everyone. And there's people from all over the world, which is really cool. I am in Ontario, Canada, and it's a nice sunny day here today. Hopefully it's a nice day where you guys are as well. Yeah, so cool to see everybody from all over. So hi. So we're going to start with doing a bit of a pencil sketch to start with. So I'm going to change my brush to one of the sketching pencils here. And today I might actually start with a bold pencil, a 6B pencil, which I have down here at the bottom. Feel free, if you're following along at home, to use any pencil that you're comfortable with. So use anything you want. And I'm going to do a new little trick that is new to Procreate 5, which I also demoed last time I did a live YouTube as well. But I want to show you guys how to make a palette from a photo. So if you click on palettes, so click on your color wheel and then click on palettes in the right-hand corner at the bottom. And you're going to select new palette at the top, so there's a plus button. And you're going to choose new from photos. And you're going to select, if I can find my reference here, the reference photo. And just like that, in like a split second, it creates a palette from the image. And it kind of gives you a cool starting ground. It's not always 100% all the colors that I end up wanting to use, but I still like that I have that challenge of still being able to mix the exact colors or find the exact colors that I like. So that's a cool new feature that I've been starting to kind of experiment with more. So I wanted to show you guys that to start out. And you can take any kind of like medium toned color. So I'm gonna choose one of these like soft browns. It's kind of a muted gray brown for my pencil sketch. And what I'm gonna do to start is just zoom out a little bit. I'm gonna do mine in a portrait orientation, even though this photo is in a landscape orientation. But I'm going to just kind of make my canvases roughly the same size to help with proportioning. And I'm going to use really sketchy broken lines to map out the face here. So I'm going to start with kind of the profile. So I want to get this angle correct, and already I know that I want to change my eraser to something opaque, like a round brush. I'm going to move my opacity down on my sketching pencil a little bit just to start out with, as I'm kind of figuring these dimensions out. I like to do circles and geometric shapes when I start out. So circles for the tip of the nose, for example, just to kind of map out some of these details. So again, I'm just using really broken, loose lines. It's almost like scribbling, gestural kind of strokes. And I think it's a good warm-up to start with, and then we'll start adding in more of our detail after. So something like this. I want to make sure that angle of the nose, I think, looks a little high. So I'm adjusting things as I go. The eye line, I want to make sure my eye lines up to the right spot. In this photo, it lines up just outside of the nostril. So I'm going to, again, use really, really broken kind of sketchy loose lines. I know it doesn't look like him yet. I'm hoping it will in a bit. And I'm really like adjusting things as I go here. Ear, kind of want to put it there. So it looks a little bit crazy right now, I know that. But I like to start out with this kind of loose approach every once in a while. And then the cheekbone here, I'm going to use a circle for. The ear, I think I'm going to move up eventually a little bit. Okay, so once you have your, oh, sorry, there was, hopefully, did you guys see that on the screen? Ah! Sorry guys, I hope that wasn't on there that long. I was very tunnel visioned in on my drawing. I'm sorry. I am using a proper Apple cable, I promise. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see now. Sorry about that. Was that on there for that long? Okay, so I have my very gestural sketch right now. And one thing that is also new to Procreate that I wanted to show you guys is, instead of doing this split screen view like we have right now, another trick we can do, I'm just going to swipe that away, is we can go to Canvas up in the Actions toolbar. So I clicked on the wrench, and then we're going to click on Reference, and we're going to choose an image, import the image, and again we're going to select our reference photo. And what's cool about this is now we have this floating reference photo box that we can use as well. So I also wanted to show you guys that feature because it's something, again, pretty new to Procreate 5. So if you want to have your whole screen for your canvas, and then you can just use this floating reference. So mine's pretty rough right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename this layer Gesture. It's like kind of my first go-to kind of warm-up drawing. And then I'm going to click on the opacity of that layer, and I'm going to make it really, really low opacity. So about 13%, okay? So you can hardly see it. It's like a ghost effect. And then I'm going to do another layer over top, and this will be my more proper, I guess, sketch layer. Before though I change over to the sketch layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize my portrait. So I don't want it to be so close to the edge. I want a little bit more of the body showing. So I'm going to, on the gesture layer, click on the selection tool, which looks like a little arrow. And I'm going to, on uniform, just kind of make this whole thing a bit smaller. And this gives you the ability to kind of fine tune and adjust where you want your portrait on the page. So I think I want mine to be about there. It's easier if you do it now rather than when you do your sketch over top, although there is a trick that you can group your layers together if you did happen to do your sketch over top before moving it. So we're going to go back to the sketch layer, and now what I want to do is I want to focus in on the details. So I'm going to zoom right in on his eyes, and I'm on a new layer now, and I'm going to go to, it's kind of like a muted black, green, brown kind of color. My palette kind of selected that color. I'm going to go to that neutral color in order to do the next part. And what we're going to do is just focus now on kind of what you might traditionally do when you start a drawing. I'm going to try to kind of do some of these details. So I'm going to start with just sketching out the eye. And there's no particular reason why I'm choosing the eye to start other than it's the only eye that you see fully in this portrait, so it's kind of an important feature of the portrait. And then what we're going to do is do a little bit of hatching, and I think I'm going to switch my pencil over to peppermint because I like how smooth the peppermint pencil is. So I'm going to switch away from my 6B for a second. And I'm going to do a little bit of hatching in the corner of the eye just to show the shadows that are in there. And this is also going to help me, for me anyway, better proportion the face, because if I try to look at the distance between the eye and then the tip of the nose here, or the bridge of the nose, I might get tricked by that shadow, right? And not be able to translate that distance properly. So I like to draw in the shadows as I go before doing all the outlines, because for me anyway, it helps me to be able to see proportions a little bit easier. I'm going to do a bit of a wispy eyebrow. The eyebrows are very faint in this portrait. And then I'm going to cut in and add the nose, which you can see already I'm on quite a different line than I was in that gestural warm-up sketch. I'm going to add in a bit of an eyelash here, just in that corner, something like this. I like this little zoomed in window too because it allows you to kind of isolate different parts of the face and zoom in on them. So it can be something pretty useful too when you're doing these types of studies. I'm going to suggest the piercing in there just again for proportion purposes. I should look at my screen more. There's no more notifications on there, right, guys? We're okay. If you guys have questions as I'm going, I'm going to try to keep looking at the comments. So please ask any questions if you have anything you want to ask about portrait drawing or Procreate or any of my Sktchy classes. I should mention to you guys that Sktchy has recently bundled a bunch of my classes together, and it's called now Portraits in Procreate with Lisa Filion, and it's available in the Sktchy Art School right now. And it features a lot of my favorite classes from the past, as well as a brand new brush making class. So last time I was on YouTube, I kind of demoed brush making with you guys. If we get to a point where maybe we can look at some brushes today, we might talk about that a bit too. But today I kind of wanted to more focus on just the fundamentals of drawing a portrait in Procreate and just have a lot of fun with shading and color and mark making, texture, and all of those things. So that's kind of my focus for today. But if you guys are interested in learning more about drawing portraits on the iPad in Procreate, yeah, that new class that's bundled is available right now in the Sktchy Art School. And thank you to people who've already joined the class. I really love seeing all of the portraits that people are making, and I love to hear about students discovering new features in Procreate or learning to love it and appreciate it as a new medium too. So it's pretty cool to see everything that people have done. Okay, so I'm just kind of continuing on with the lip here and just under the chin. Again, you can see I'm veering off of my original outlines a bit from my gesture. I'm going to zoom out on that. And I'm also going to go back to my split screen view. If I can swipe up. There we go. So swipe up, pull to the side. I'm going to go back to this view as well. And I'll just kind of put that aside for a minute. You can also get rid of it, but for now, we'll just kind of keep it to the side. So then I like also to look at this view. I still think it's useful to do the Apple split screen view as well, because now this I can kind of see again. I can adjust my canvas to the same size, or I can adjust the face so it's roughly the same size, and then I can kind of better see proportions. So he's got really defined cheekbones, so we're going to add those awesome cheekbones in there. And we're going to continue on with adding our details on the hair. So I'm just going to proportion this braid in roughly the spot that it's going to go. So at first I'm just going to use kind of just lines, just loose line work in order to suggest the braids. And then we'll do something more interesting with them later. Definitely my ear is in the wrong spot from my gesture drawing, so I'm moving that ear over right now. I want to make the beard a little bit poofier. Is that a word, guys? Poofy? I think it is. Okay. Got to get the curve of the shirt here. The collar. I often like to do the most detail on the face, and then I don't know if it's just because I don't love drawing clothing or it just kind of became a stylistic thing at some point where I'll leave the clothing or sometimes even the hair a little bit more abstract. So we'll probably do something like that with this one today. I like to put some geometric lines or just lines in general, just to make the face a little bit more interesting. It also helps me, again, like I put those lines in just to help me with shading, to look at where that highlight kind of falls on the face. Same with here, right? The cheekbone is here. this becomes more shaded, all of that good stuff. And then just some squiggly lines again to suggest the braids, not finished at all. Okay, maybe something like that. I take my eraser now at this point, and anything that I want to clean up, I'll just go in. I don't want the line to be maybe as harsh, go in with my eraser. Okay, and I'm gonna maybe swipe away on this for now, and we'll come back to that one later. So now I don't need that gesture drawing, so I'm going to get rid of it. And even with this one here, this sketch, will keep it like this for now, but we're gonna create a new layer. And I'm going to rename this layer base color. And what we're going to do is going to start to fill in, exactly like that layer sounds, the base color for the portrait. So I'll start with kind of a medium tone for the face, and I'll grab that from my color palette. And I'm going to kind of use a few different brushes today. You guys, if you follow me at all, you'll know that I'm a little bit obsessed with the gouache brush, but today I'm going to try to change it up. I mean, I might come back to the gouache, but I'm going to use the Salamanca brush right here. It's found under painting. I like that it has a canvas kind of texture to it, and it's a little bit painterly, and it's fun to work with. So we're going to use that. And I'm trying to not lift my pencil as I do it because the Salamanca brush is not 100% opaque. I also don't have my opacity at 100% opacity right now either. And so I'm not lifting my brush so that I don't get any weird lines. So that's pretty good. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to now start to go over top of it. And my opacity, just in case people want to know, is right now about 56%, maybe 60%. So it's not super high. So what I like to do at this stage is just start to add highlights, lowlights, shadows, basically the values to the face. So I'm going to add some of the lightest values right now. So under the eyes, definitely the eye itself, the forehead here. And then there was a bit of an orange tone, so you guys probably saw that I started to add that in. So I'm going to add a bit more orange to this color, just kind of layering over top of what I already did. We're going to try to keep this a little bit more painterly today. You can grab from your palette, but I also just like to move around on the color wheel as well. I'm going to bring my opacity way down, 26% right now. Maybe even lower, actually, 12%. Okay. No, I don't like 12. I like 20. I like around 20. Okay. So just bring that down. If it gets too low, with certain brushes react differently on different opacities. So you have to kind of experiment with the brush and see what works for you. But I'm finding on too low, I get more of a canvasy kind of dry brush texture. So if you don't want that, then you might want to kind of adjust the opacity. So Betty asks, how much memory do you have on your iPad Pro, Lisa? I think mine is the 512 model, so the 0.5 terabyte one. I kind of went overkill when I bought this one because my first iPad Pro that I had before only had 32 gigs on it, and I kept running out of space. So because I found that so annoying, I just kind of went a little crazy and got a lot of storage on this one, and I haven't had any problems with it. You can even get, I think there's definitely over 1 terabyte now, but yeah, at the time, I think it was like one of the second biggest options you could get for memory. So I'm glad I got it. I haven't really checked lately to see if I'm even coming close to filling that space. But I mostly use my iPad for either, like reading or sometimes like watching movies and stuff if I'm traveling, but mostly for drawing. And then for teaching, I use it to mark on as well. So to just write comments and things like that. But in terms of memory, it's definitely my drawings that take up the most space. Yeah, if anybody else has any questions about anything, please ask. I'm just scrolling through the comments right now. Okay, so yeah, so we have a good kind of base line down right now. Just gonna keep kind of going with it over here. Using the side of my pencil. And in this base coat too, I'm not, again, just kind of like that gesture layer, I'm having fun. I'm not taking it too seriously yet. I'm just laying down a foundation. I'm gonna go to an almost black, not quite black, to start adding in some of the facial hair and the darker values. So we'll just add that in. And I'm also going to do a bit of a base coat for the hair as well. Yeah, so I was saying earlier in the broadcast that currently I'm really enjoying the color green for some reason. So I was really drawn to this photo for one reason, for a lot of reasons, but one of them was the green background I find really cool and painterly. And then I really love the profile picture. I love the lighting of this portrait. I love that in the Sktchy app you can just kind of scroll through tons and tons of portraits until you find the inspiration that works for you for that particular day. And so I was really feeling this one. So I hope you guys like drawing it too. So yeah, I'm just doing some shadows. Can shadow around the neck a little bit too. And then once you are finished with kind of adding your base color, you can create another color layer over top of everything. And this is the layer that I'm going to add more detail to it. So just taking a look again to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, I hope you guys are drawing along with me today because I want to see everyone's portraits in the end. So we're now on a color over layer. I've just simply called it color. Before I start coloring on that layer though, I'm going to change the background color to one of these greens because I was just talking about green. So you're going to go to, sorry, the layer panel. You're going to click on background color and then you're going to select one of these greens for the background color. I think I might go really dark and then start building my lighter colors over top. So I'm going to start with this dark one. And then you can also see from changing the background color, you can see where the portrait has more or less opacity. So you can, in parts of it, I think I did a pretty good job of covering most of it, but you can see a little bit of the green peeking through here. And this is something stylistically that you could play around with too, because sometimes it can be really interesting to see little peaks of color coming through. So we're gonna go back to our skin tone palette. So it seems like it's created at the top here. I'm gonna make a dark brown. So I took one of the darkest browns and I'm going to make it even darker. And I'm going to make that Salamanca brush quite a bit smaller. And we're going to use it just to, again, starting with this eye, just almost outline it, add a little bit of detail. And this is one of my favorite parts of drawing in Procreate at this stage, where I don't even have to go back to my color palette very much anymore, because I can start to grab colors by tapping with my finger onto the iPad. And so that color grabber feature just really makes your workflow super nice. And I'll just keep kind of grabbing colors and shades and adding them. I feel like, I don't know how, everybody approaches a portrait differently, so I always find it interesting how different artists approach different parts of their portrait, or what order they do things in. The eye, for me, if I can get a good realistic looking eye at this stage, then I kind of feel good about continuing on with the rest of my portrait. So I think that's why I really like to start with one kind of heavily detailed area. And I mean, I'll keep coming back to it, but I also will stay with it for a little while to get it to a place where I'm kind of comfortable with it, so I don't feel like it's too ugly to look at for the whole time. I don't know, we all have our thing, right? So I want to kind of get the area around this eye done, and then I'll move on to other areas. So I'm going to use really bright orange right now. Don't be afraid to use color in the skin tones too. You can use colors, you can exaggerate colors that aren't really in the person's photo, but you can just, you can see a little bit of warmth there. So I'm going to use a brighter orange than what really would appear in real life. Same with this yellow. It's kind of like a mustard yellow. I see some hints of yellow in the lighting in this portrait, and I think it would be cool to make it really dramatic by adding a lot of little hints of yellow in here as well. So I'm still using the Salamanca brush for anybody who's just joining, which I was saying to people before is a bit of a departure for me, because I love a gouache brush so much. I love the gouache brushes so much that I made my own set of gouache brushes as well. And that's something, again, in the Portraits in Procreate class that I teach in the Sktchy art school. One of the newest lessons added to it is how to make your own brushes. So if you guys are at that point in your Procreate journey of wanting to kind of take it to the next level, like you maybe already kind of know the program, you're comfortable enough practicing with the tools, then you can actually make your own brushes. And it's actually pretty simple. You don't need to be an expert at Procreate by any means to start making brushes. It's something that you can do right away as soon as you get the program, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, so you guys can see I'm just layering a lot of different colors over top of each other. I'm going to go back to my palette for a minute here and grab this kind of peachy color. Use it for the nose. I'm going to grab some of my oranges I've put down. Use it for the nose. Now the Salamanca brush, it leaves kind of, you can see it has like these painterly strokes to it. You can decide, if you guys are using the Salamanca brush today, you can decide if that's something you want to keep, or if that's something you want to go into and clean up with an eraser. So for example, if this is maybe a little too crazy, of course this might be on my base color now that I'm saying it, but you could go and with an eraser, and I would recommend maybe even using the same brush, or maybe I use my trusty gouache brush for the eraser for this one, because I know that it's going to be a nice soft edge that it creates. So you could go around and just clean up some of those edges. So these little mistakes, if you will, most of them were actually on my base color. So now I can go back up here. Okay. So this is how I like to start, with laying down colors. And it doesn't look the greatest at first, but you gotta kind of stick with it. And we're just gonna keep building interesting color layers. So I'm just gonna go wild here and add a big bold color. Not going to worry about the hair, right? Because this was just a placeholder anyway, so we'll come back to the hair later. Don't want to forget about the ear. In the areas that are in shadow, you're going to get a darker shade. Make sure you're layering in all those shadowed areas. Also, if your portrait starts to get either too light or too dark, you can always take one dominant color and kind of like what I'm doing right now with like a chocolate brown color, and you can just take that color on a low opacity and just go in and color over everything. So it just kind of has a muting effect a little bit, and it helps to start to blend in colors. Oh, Kelly says she likes the texture lesson. That's awesome, Kelly. I'm so glad that you liked that. Yeah, I love adding texture to portraits because I sometimes think that some work that's done digitally, although it can be really beautiful, can look really, really smooth and it has that digital kind of look. So I like often challenging myself to try to make digital art look somewhat like its analog counterpart. So kind of look a little bit, again, texture, right? Texture comes into play when you're trying to make something look more analog or more like real life materials, not so digital. So yeah, so playing with texture can be a lot of fun. So I'm glad you like that. Yeah, Betty asks a good question. Do you ever duplicate your layers to get more opacity? Yeah, for sure. So that's a cool trick that you can do too. And I'm glad you brought it up, Betty, because you can, so on this color layer, I can duplicate the layer and that just instantly builds up the color. I could duplicate it again. You can do that as many times as you want. And then you can merge those down or you can keep them as separate layers, whatever works, but I just pinch them together to merge them all into one layer. And now I've built up a lot of opacity without having to painstakingly go over each detail. So thanks, Betty. That is a great tip and something that's really useful for a lot of people. Milika asks, how do I prevent the shape wanting to become a straight line? My sketching lines tend to go to that edit shape thing. So if I'm understanding correctly, what's happening is, I'll just go over to this blank part of the screen, is, here, let me get something a little more contrasty, is you're doing a line, but if you rest too long on that line, it snaps and your shape mode will come into effect. So basically what I think you're doing is after you do a stroke, you're pausing too long on the screen. So if you're trying to do like a squiggly line, you really have to lift your pencil off the page. You can't, for example, hold it down because that's what's snapping the line in place. So I hope that helps. It might just be practicing getting a little bit used to that feature. It is a really useful feature though. You might find it annoying right now, but hopefully once you kind of get the hang of using it, it's a really nice feature to have because earlier versions of Procreate, there was actually no way of generating shapes. So I actually created a whole bunch of, that's actually one of the reasons why I got into brush making in the first place was when I was using Procreate and I wanted to create a circle, for example, a perfect circle. I was frustrated because I couldn't. I would have to import in an image and whatever. So instead, what I did is I made my own circle brushes, and then that way I always had access to a circle. So kind of cool little Procreate history there. How many of you guys used Procreate before the shape features? I'd be interested to know because it wasn't so long ago. Technology moves so quickly. Okay, so I feel like I'm going so slow today, guys. Sorry. So I'm going kind of slow, but what we're going to do next is we're going to go to our smudge tool. And I'm going to change it also to Salamanca just to keep the consistency. And we're just going to use this on a very low opacity to just kind of move paint around on the canvas. Again, if you're using too smooth of a brush, you might get that kind of digital texture that I was talking about before, the really smooth kind of texture. Of course, if that's what you're aiming for, the smudge tool might be a good tool to use. But if you use the smudge tool with a brush that has some texture to it, like the Salamanca brush, what you're going to find is that it'll still retain some texture even when you're smudging. And you can use it to actually fix up proportions and details as well. So that's what I'm kind of doing here with the eye, is I'm using that smudge tool to fix up the shape of the eye. Put down a highlight here. And I'm also putting down a crazy orange color apparently. I'm gonna start to hopefully pick up my pace a little bit here. I kind of like that orange color. So it's very, very vibrant. Obviously it's different than the original photo, but I'm gonna keep it for now, and I'm gonna use it for some of my highlighting. And again, I'm color picking right now, so I'm just taking colors that are already on the canvas and moving them around. I'm going to zoom out a little bit to see what I'm doing here. I'm going to put in a bit of a tooth. Just going to outline the mouth a little bit for now, and then use a bit of a peachy pink tone for the lips. So let me see. Betty, you say I get very confused about how to use the blending modes effectively, like for shadows and adding depth. Do you cover that in your new class in any more detail? Not in the new class because it's more focused on brush making and then using different textures and different brushes and how to use them effectively to create 4 different kinds of portraits. So, and then all the other Procreate lessons, we do use blend modes definitely in some lessons, but more in a cursory way, not so much in the portrait itself, but more in like looking at like the background details and kind of experimenting with some stuff. Honestly, it's not something I use a lot of. So for people that want to know what Betty is referring to here, is the blend modes can be found in the layer panel. If you click on the N, these are the blend modes here. So you can choose things like color burn, obviously, that's kind of crazy. Darken, multiply. And so these are some of the options that you can go through and apply to your portrait. So they can be something kind of interesting. What I'll do is kind of show you, I want to go back. So I'm just going to go back through all of them. Turn it back to normal. Okay. What you can do, what I like to do is kind of what you were saying before, Betty, where you create a new layer over top and then experiment with blend modes on that layer and then change the opacity. So maybe I can do that in a second, just to show you just some of the ways that I've used it before, but I definitely wouldn't say that I'm an expert on blend modes, but it is something that we can go over a little bit today, and then maybe something to keep in mind for a future class. If people are interested in that, I could explore that more as well. Yeah, so I'll show you how I would use blend modes in a few minutes. I'm just going to kind of finish what I'm doing here. So I'm going to just keep kind of going with my shading a little bit. That neck needs to be a bit wider, so I'm going to change that. I'm loving this orange because I think it's kind of cool against the green too. I love pink and green together. I think that's a great combo because it's kind of split complementary. And actually that's another topic we cover in one of my Procreate classes that's in the Portraits in Procreate with Lisa Filion class right now. Is there's a whole color theory section. And using some of Procreate's built-in kind of color theory modes and palettes as inspiration. So that was a fun class to do, and that's a fairly recent class too. And that's included as part of the bundle, I believe. Okay, so I'm gonna go in now and start blending a bit more. Don't want to take away too much of that orange because I really love that orange. Okay, so I'm just using my blend tool right now to blend out these details. Especially need to work on the mouth because I kind of neglected it. I think I got distracted. I started the mouth and then I think I kind of went away from it and stopped. I also like using the blend mode just to kind of create brushy textures too. So I think that works really well for especially like things like the beard. And then I might take something that has more structure to it. So I'm going to go back to my pencil on a really dark brown, almost black, and I'm going to zoom in and just certain areas. Again, the eyes is one of my first focuses, like the eyelashes. I'm going to just go in and define some of these areas a bit more because I don't want to lose them in kind of my more abstract brushwork that I've been doing. Again, go back and forth between colors. so that you can blend things away, because I don't want necessarily big harsh outlines either. So doing that kind of back and forth technique that we were talking about, of taking a color picking, for example, with the eyebrows, and then laying down that selected color and color picking what's around it, can really help to create just more natural looking details. So I think that looks pretty good for the eyebrows. I'm gonna add a bit of highlighting on the eyebrows because you kind of lose it in the dark green color of the background. And similarly, I wanna add a bit of a highlight. So I'm taking like a peach color and I wanna highlight this nose so that it really pops out. And again, I'm just gonna take colors that surround those areas so that I don't have a really harsh outline. My bright orange, I might still keep it on the forehead because I think it kind of looks cool there as a highlight. Again, I might keep the bright orange for the cheekbone. I'm going to use it also, this brown, to just better kind of outline the mustache and the beard. So just using some wispy lines. Still not happy with this mouth. It's definitely needs to be worked on more. So I'm going to play around with that. So that angle needs to be fixed. I'm just going to use, again, my pencil just to fix those areas. This angle too needs to be fixed. So I'm just touching up some of those things. And do a bit of line work again on the ears. I also am going to add just a few hatching lines to the neck, just to give it a little bit of texture. And under the chin. And you could do this pencil layer that I'm doing right now, you could do it on a separate layer too. I kind of kept it all on the color layer, but it might be nice to start isolating layers and using a few, because we do have 70 layers apparently in this particular canvas that I've made. So I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I'm taking colors that I want to use, and then I'm looking at other places to repeat those colors. So if it looks like I'm jumping around, I guess I am, but there's a little bit of reason to it. So I'm still kind of working on around the mouth. I'm not quite happy with it yet. If I zoom out, definitely my portrait is looking a lot more orange on YouTube than it does on my screen. So why don't we right now, this might be a good time to experiment with those blend options that we were talking about before. So you can duplicate your layer, and I did this before, just swiping and duplicating it, which obviously kind of intensifies it. But what you can also do is you can play around with opacities and using blend modes between the two layers. So this is something that might be of interest to people. So you could go on your lower layer, for example, and change the opacity of it. You could go on the upper layer, again, change maybe the opacity of that. And then you could try some of these blend modes and see if there's anything that you like. I don't really love these vivid ones because I already find mine is pretty vivid. Luminosity is kind of interesting. Yeah, so you could kind of scroll through and see, there's the normal one. Darker is a little bit dramatic, so I could kind of go with that. So you can play around with blend modes in that way between the two layers, and I find that playing around with the opacity also really helps because this would look different with the opacity. It's subtle, but the opacity turned down or moved up. Same with if I chose the layer below it, which I did adjust the opacity on, it looks quite different if I start playing around with the opacities. You guys can kind of see there's a bit of a subtle difference there. So that would be how I would probably use blend modes. I'm going to just check to see if you guys have any more questions or comments. Yeah, not lifting the pencil. Carol Lee says not lifting the pencil helps to get a smooth effect. Definitely. So it just depends on what kind of technique you're looking for. And then Arlene asks, I just did a pencil sketch. Can I upload it now by scanning it? Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of artists that I know who start with a pencil sketch on paper and then they upload it into Procreate and then they go back and forth. I mean, there's lots of really interesting things you can do to combine more traditional media with Procreate. So what you're going to do is you're going to scan your sketch or take a photo of it, and then you're going to import it by clicking on the wrench and going add and inserting photo, and then you can insert it into your canvas and you can use it as your base sketch layer and then go over top of it with any of your Procreate brushes. So that could definitely be something, if you're more comfortable starting with a analog medium, you could definitely do that and then bring it into Procreate. Okay, I'm gonna make a layer above. I might just call it details. I'm not very creative with my layer naming, but I do name my layers. I think it's a kind of a good thing to get into the habit of doing because it does, for me anyway, it does help, especially when I'm using or doing a canvas that has a ton of layers. It can get confusing. So I've done drawings before that, might have like 50 or 70 layers, and yeah, you really want to name your layers in that case. Okay, I'm adding some yellow. I'm just feeling the yellow, so I'm gonna add it in there. There we go. And before we keep going too much, on this detail layer, I wanna add a couple of things. I wanna add some of the piercings back in because I did lose some of that. I'm gonna add that there, and then I'm gonna suggest a bit of a piercing here. I'm gonna add a bit of a white highlight to the eye too, just to make it pop a little bit more. I'm going to uncheck the sketch layer to get rid of that because I don't feel like it's something that's really useful to me anymore. And I'm going to work on adding a little bit of detail to these piercings. So I'm just going over with black, almost outlining it. I'm not really doing the exact earring that he has. I'm kind of doing my own thing a bit. And add a bit of yellow to it. I'm also going to smudge it out just to make it nice and smooth. My smudge tool is set to Salamanca, so it's a little bit challenging. And on this detail layer, I'm actually just going to keep going with my shading of the skin. I'm going to change back to Salamanca. And I'm going to bring that orange back in because I miss my orange. I'm going right over top of the hair because I'm going to focus more on the shadows underneath the hair, and then we can always put in the hair on a different layer afterwards. I know I kind of just got rid of that piercing that I just made, but that's okay. Okay. So I'm going over it and I am toning down some of the previous colors that I had put on. And then keeping the colors that I want to keep intact. I want to also kind of suggest there's some creases on the forehead, so suggest that. I'm going to start transitioning my shading to more circular shading, so I'm doing tiny little circles with my brush instead of strokes, and that's just also a way of kind of blending, but doesn't blend as far as the smudge tool does. And this is probably my favorite part of a portrait, where there's still a bit of a challenge to it, but you've kind of, you're on your way. You've kind of figured out the proportions that you need to figure out. You kind of have a style and a direction you're going with. And now it's just, for me, layering, layering, layering. So again, I'm using those circular motions. I want to add in the highlights. So I'm doing that right now. But I still want certain parts to look over top, like I want the beard to go over top of that highlight, so I have to layer back over top of it. I know I'm running out of time a little bit here, but I do want to get to the background, so I'm going to just keep kind of going with this. So we have, you know, some shading started. Remember how I talked about at the beginning, if you want to move things around the canvas? I kind of think at this point I do. I'm going to put my sketch back on just really quickly right now because I'm going to do on the base color, I'm going to do a shirt layer just so it doesn't look like he's a floating head. But what I want to show you guys how to do is group layers, combine them. So I'm going to click on the top layer and I'm going to go combine down, and it's created a new layer group. So those two layers are now inside of that group. If you click on that group, you can just keep pressing combine down, combine down. So you just keep doing that all the way down to the bottom. You can name this new group portrait, which can be really useful because if you're doing something that has background components or maybe a two-person portrait, or maybe he has an animal or whatever, you can isolate those different parts into different layer groups. So now that everything is in this portrait group, we can do what we did in the beginning too, and we can move it because I felt like his hair was getting a little too cut off. I didn't like that, so I want to move that away from the edge. And that's just a little trick that I like to do because it just helps with proportions, and then also it just keeps all of your layers nicely organized. So we might on this base layer, I might just kind of finish the hair a little bit. There we go. Okay. And before I forget, we're going to go to the shirt layer. And he's wearing a black shirt, so I'm just going to, with the Salamanca brush, just do like a suggestion of a shirt. So it's going to be really, really painterly, I guess we'll call it. Scribbly. So suggesting the shirt, there we go. Now I can get rid of those sketch lines again if I don't want them. And then we're going to have a little bit of fun with the background. So if you want to get rid of your gesture sketch, you can do that because I don't need it anymore. But on the background, you could have, you could call it for background paint or whatever you want to call it. And then again, if we want to use the same brush, I've been dying to use these greens at the bottom here, so I really want to do that right now. You can start doing some really interesting, using this Salamanca brush, which is, I think this is like what it's really made for, right? This brush is so cool for using a really large size. You can create all these interesting textures with it. It almost looks like the photograph, the textures that it's creating. So that's kind of cool. Get some that are darker than others if you want to create a bit of a shadow effect. I want to get some of the light greens. Try it with a few different sizes of brushes too. And you, of course, don't have to just use the Salamanca brush because that might get kind of boring. You can try out a few different brushes as well. I don't think I'm going to do the window in the background. I'm just going to suggest kind of the green paint. So you can choose what aspects of the photograph you want to keep and what aspects you want to get rid of. So kind of interesting effects that you can create in the background. And I do like that some of these greens are showing through to other areas. And I love, let's go back up to our portrait details. And by the way, this background paint doesn't have to be under portrait, so you can drag it outside of the portrait layer. So now that background paint is on its own. So again, to keep things isolated. So if I wanted to move this portrait around the canvas, I'm not going to move that paint around the canvas. And that might be a really useful thing to do. And yeah, so what we're going to do is just as a last kind of item before we go here, under details, I am going to use a little bit of green in the portrait itself, even though he doesn't have any really green elements to the portrait in the photograph. I love just like adding touches of color from the background in. So I'm going to add a little bit of a subtle green effect under the eyes there. So just right here. I'm going to add a little bit of green, and I'm using a really pale green, but into his eyebrows. Why not outline his nostril in green? I mean, why wouldn't you do that, right? And then even use it for shadow effects. So I'm going to use a little bit over here. I'm going to use it in his facial hair. I still have to work on this mouth, guys. That'll be my job this afternoon, is to finish this mouth. The mouth did not turn out well today. I just need more time. I say this every time I do a YouTube live with you guys, is that I normally take longer than an hour to do my portrait, so it is a struggle to do everything that I want to do within a short amount of time. I need really about 2 hours, I would say, probably, to properly do what I usually want to do. And yeah, if this pace moved quickly for you, don't worry. In the classes that I teach in the Sktchy Art School, the pace is quite a bit slower. It's also, you have lifetime access to the videos, so what's cool about it is you can go at your own pace too, and there's tons of other students who are either currently taking my classes or have taken them in the past, and they are sharing their artwork all the time in the Sktchy Art School, which I love because you can see what other students are doing and it really creates a sense of community. So if you guys haven't had a chance to check it out yet, check out the classes that Sktchy has offered on the school. And I think Sktchy posted a link to my class. So it's my new Procreate class where there's a whole bunch of lessons and classes combined into one. So it really is an amazing deal because you get about 25 plus hours of instruction in the class. I'm just going to switch over as I'm talking to you guys. And yeah, and you get it all in one. And like I said, you can go at your own pace. You can choose what order you want to do the class in. So if you're really into brush making right now and you want to start with that, you can. Or if you're new to Procreate, you might want to start with one of the beginner lessons that takes you through how to set up a canvas and what you can do with the different tools. So there really is something there for everyone, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced user of Procreate. And everything focuses on drawing drawing portraits. So there is still a portrait focus in all of the classes as well. So yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoyed drawing with me today. I still have a bit more work. I'm going to switch back just to show you what I've done so far. I'm not done by any means, so hold on. Here we go. So I'm not finished. It's not exactly where I would want it to be. I can see things that I would want to fix up and change, even proportion wise. So I'm gonna keep kind of working on it this afternoon. And I'm actually I can't help myself. Once I see something that's like a mistake, I gotta go into it and fix it. Okay. But anyway, I I hope you enjoyed looking at kind of a more painterly approach by using the Salamanca brush today. If you zoom in, you can see a lot of crazy brush strokes and details. And if you guys have any questions at all, you can always find me also on the Sktchy Art School, so you can message me there as you're working through the classes. If you come into any technical problems or you have any questions, yeah, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the class. Thank you so much for joining me today, and please post your pictures if you guys drew along with me today, and I'd love to see what you created. Okay, have a great afternoon, guys. Thank you. Bye.